partner Carl Muleisen, who runs Omos 41, which is our practice in New York City. This is a sketch by Frank Gehry for the Disney Concert Hall. Gary's sketches have become almost as well known as the buildings that come from them. When his pen touches the paper, what erupts is an evolving definition of what he's thinking. It's continual discovery. He doesn't sketch surfaces or edges explicitly, but the masses that define them, and that in the end is largely what he builds. Lou Kahn's Kimball Art Museum. Kahn's drawings are almost inevitably drawings of darkness and lightness. His interest in surface and in the light that defines that surface was integral to the way he sketched. The massing is something that comes out of the weight of the rich pencils he used, and most of his buildings revolve around that definition of light and dark. The masses are embedded within the shadows. This is a sketch by Tom Main for the Cooper Union. The lines that Main draws and lays onto the page are ones that delineate tectonic moves, slices, shifts, projections, bends, etc. His pencil isn't depicting light and dark necessarily, and not even mass, at least not primarily, but of the moves that define the conditions of the architecture, and what he builds, that's what he builds. Richard Meyer's Getty Center. Not unlike the others, Meyer's drawings reveal the nature of his thinking. The drawing is about spatial relationships, geometric organization, the confluence of grids, and the responses to the landscape that his building sits within. And because of his resonance with order, Meyer's pencil hits the paper in a way that points to his training with a parallel bar and triangle, almost drafted. The more that we're captivated by digital means of expression, the less and less these seem to be valued. These lines have a scale and a relationship to my hand, and they have the potential to change during the course of their construction. Both were made with Sanford 314 pencil on a 12-inch roll of buff trace taped to a Greg Borco with half-inch black drafting tape, one freehand, the other drafted. This is what far too many students, I think, are apparently being taught to understand as the definition of a line, that a line is a command. Specify first point and then specify second point. Never mind the potential for what might happen along the way. This line is without true scale, without direct relationship to the one who created it, and without investigation. It's merely 2 points connected. And when you connect enough of those points, you can make something as lovely as this little gem. Keep in mind, this is only about the drawing, but unfortunately, the quality of this drawing doesn't vary much from many you see coming out of architecture schools. It isn't because the students aren't thoughtful or because the professors aren't teaching architecture. It's because the creation of the line itself is losing value. Before computers became ubiquitous features of the desktop, drafting tables were reserved for paper, pencils, triangles, chipboard, foam core knives, cutting mats, glue, coffee, and cigarettes. A line drafted at 150 feet long at quarter-inch scale meant that someone was hunched over the table and pulling their arm across the paper for more than 3 feet, and hopefully learning to spin the pencil correctly. I would argue that the nature of the analog studio was that by default, there was a more intimate relationship between the architect and the medium. As it is now, architects all know the drill, right? Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, pan. As a design medium, the computer interface in its current state offers a perpetual and scaleless disconnect from what's being made, and this is all despite its very positive aspects. The next logical step in the evolution of the architecture studio. Students holding their digital work aloft as they and critics alike don a piece of equipment attached to the side of their heads, offering hallucinations of grandeur and a sense of enormous virtual accomplishment. YouTube videos will surface of critics and students simultaneously conducting architectural fantasies in concert in white rooms. No pencils. My first 2 years in school, there were no computers on drafting tables. My third year, it was entirely 3D Studio on DOS. And by my 5th year, we were all sketching, drafting, and physically and digitally modeling. It was neither entirely analog nor entirely digital. And that's where I think we need to be. Drawing a line with your hand is not a nostalgic reference to an archaic past. This is what my 7-year-old son thinks I look like at work. Also, he's not far off. So I know this may sound like a digital dismissal, but I'm not trying to devalue technological advances or their inclusion and importance in architectural discourse. I and my office all take considerable pleasure in digital design and production work. He's zooming. Very brief examples of this. One of many pieces of furniture for Work 59, an apartment in New York. Work 94, a house in Ballymoney, Ireland. Work 102, a pizza oven turret in Long Island. Work 105, a deck and pool, also in Long Island. Work 106, a house in Malpais, Costa Rica. Work 107, a small art gallery in Los Angeles. And Work 108, a house edition here in Toronto, all digital. But before my practice makes any line by specifying points or creating surfaces, masses, or anything with the word nerd attached to it, we necessarily produce work by hand. This is part of our wall here in the Toronto studio. We did have paper pinned to the wall, but a drawing we were working on went beyond its edges, so we just kept going. There's something remarkably liberating about drawing on a wall without your parents getting them mad. Okay. This is a drawing I started working on a few months ago. I'll add a few lines as they come to me. The drawing addresses, for me, various conditions of walls, their relationships with each other, the relationship with space, and when they expand beyond their own definition, becoming something else entirely. I don't necessarily have an end goal for this, but the point for me is to have the drawing educate me. This is a project that's just in its design stage. First series of plans I drew up for the house we're doing in Costa Rica. This drawing shows the 3 levels of the house in different colors overlaid on each other. The development plans include changes that were the direct result of this drawing and others like it. These drawings are a discovery for me of the way the components relate to each other and to the tremendous topography of the site. Currently under construction in Thunder Bay, this small house is quite economical, both in plan and materials. Where it's interesting to me is in its section, something that was explored in this perspective sketch, then developed in both physical and digital models, and finally drafted in this section for the construction drawings. The photo shows the sectional moment in the back of the house as it's being framed. This is a hybrid of an early hand-drafted plan and the eventual construction plan for a house we're building near Georgian Bay. What we like to believe is that the interest and attention that we pay to drawing by hand, both in sketching and in drafting, translates to our construction drawings. We've spent a considerable amount of time over the years developing a layer structure and drafting structure that give us the ability to draft digitally as beautifully as we can. So in the event that I haven't been clear in these 6 minutes, what I'm trying to say is that I think it's time to take up arms, our hands. We should be educating students to hold a pencil in a way that means something, not only as a 5-second conversation with a professor or because they're on the subway and without a computer, but as a way to intentionally discover architectural value through an internal process made physical. I get that there are many architects who are proficient and elegant when it comes to bringing their ideas of space and building and form without physically drawing, and definitely architects who would argue with me about my entire premise. But I believe that drawing for an architecture student and architect should not be considered a necessary evil or a stand-in for digital production, but something that is taught with value as it provides the freedom of dialogue. And sometimes that dialogue is with the professor, sometimes with themselves. That was the punchline, the last one. That's all that was. Thank you.